from Insight to Influence. I'm Zoe, first of all, from the Wordnerds Customer Success team. Really excited that everyone could be here joining us this afternoon. We'll move into the plan for today and the content very shortly, but just while we're giving everyone a few minutes to join, it'd be lovely if we've got a chat function on the right-hand side, if we could just get to know everyone who's here in the meantime. So please do pop in the chat who you are, your job title, which organisation you're with, perhaps where you're joining us from today, and even maybe what the weather's like to start a bit of conversation. We've got a nice sunny day in Newcastle today. It's actually quite warm, which makes a bit of a difference recently. So I can't feel too jealous if it's nice and sunny anywhere else. So yeah, please do let us know where you're from. Hey, Shireen. It's hot. That is very nice. We're also joined by our other presenters today. You can see Jenny and Stella. We'll get to know them very shortly when we get into the content and the plan for today. Hey everyone, hi Meek from Dorchester, hi Tim, sunny in Plymouth, that sounds lovely, and Neve from Liverpool, Head of Insights. Thank you all for joining us. We'll just give things a couple more minutes before we move into today's agenda. Hi Maddie, Insights Analyst from Curo in Bath, too hot. That's when you get to complain. I always feel like we very British thing to do, wait for it to be sunny and then say it's too hot, but you can't win, can you? Helen, hi Helen, BI reporting specialist, ideal. Hi Carol, sunny in South Tees, not too far from us up in Newcastle and Gateshead. Hi Vic, Senior Strategy Support Experience Manager for British Red Cross, lovely to have you here today. Oh, up in Scotland, might be the winner of most northerly so far, Vic. Hi Carl from Sainsbury's, Gift Card Insights, very interesting. Hi Saz from Wordnerds, our usual webinar host. I feel like I've got a lot to live up to today with Saz watching, but hopefully I can do a good job. Hey Nat, Sunny Sunderland, classic. Hi Cheyenne, good to see you as well. And Ian from Northumbrian Water, close to us in Newcastle. Great, lovely to have everyone here today. Great that everyone's found the chat as well. Please do continue using that as we move through the content, and you can also pop any questions in there as we go, and we'll be coming to those at the end too. I think what we'll do now is just, you can see we've got quite a lot of people joined today. Obviously let people continue joining and letting us know where you're here from in the chat. In the meantime, we'll just move through and take a look at the plan for today and what we're going to cover in the next hour. So the headline for today is that we'll be looking at from insight to influence, using customer feedback to map and validate your customer journey and influence stakeholders. So hopefully everyone's in the right place for that. We're going to start by setting the scene and introducing the challenges that you might face as insights professionals that might be familiar to you. Then we're going to move into the bit that personally I'm most excited about today and hear Jenny's complete real-world transformation story from some work she's done at Grainger. Super impressive, super special, so really lucky to get to hear that today. We're then going to extract the key lessons from that into a framework which you can apply and understand why that customer journey is such a powerful lens for looking at feedback and insights. Then we've got Stella, who's going to be delivering a live platform demo, and we'll give you that step-by-step guide for how you can implement this process, mapping your customer feedback onto your customer journey. And then we'll finish at the end with a live Q&A with our experts. So please do use the chat throughout as you're doing for questions. We'll save them all to the end so we can have a nice discussion, but pop them in as we go if any come to mind as we're running through the content. We've also got a resource to give at the end, a toolkit, which kind of summarises everything that we've looked at today. So that will be available to download then as well. So just to get to know our experts a bit better, firstly, I'm excited to introduce Jenny from Grainger, who is the Director of Customer Experience at Grainger PLC. Jenny's bringing her real-world CX leadership experience working with major brands, including P&O Ferries and M&S. And she's been leading some seriously impressive transformation at Grainger, which we're all very lucky that we get to hear about that very shortly today. Secondly, I'd love to introduce Stella, who's an insights analyst in our brilliant insights and innovation team here at Wordnerds. Stella's job is that she's going to show you the practical methodology, give you a live platform demo using some real data from TripAdvisor reviews. So no pressure there, Stella. And as I've said, we'll answer questions at the end. Both Stella, Jenny, and myself will be available in that Q&A session. So just to get us started, we'd like to start with some framing around why we're all here today. So I think a lot of people in the audience will be able to relate to the problem that often great insights alone are not enough. And to make that real world difference, you need to get some buy-in from your stakeholders to act on the insights. But the challenge that we're seeing is that it can be natural for our brains to be a bit resistant to new information. So we need to look at how we can frame insight in a way that is more easily understood and accepted. So hopefully you can all see on the right-hand side there, we've got a little poll just so that before we come to understanding and solving this problem, we get a bit of insight from everyone here today in terms of how insights usually land at your organization. So the question we'd love to hear from you on is, when you present customer insights, what do stakeholders usually do? So a few options we've got: take notes, say thanks, carry on as before, ask how do we action this, perhaps challenge the data or the methodology, share their own anecdotes that might contradict it, get excited and make changes, or is it something else? Please do drop that in the chat and we can have a look at that today as well. So hopefully I can see quite a few people answering through that poll now. We'll just give it a few seconds to let more people pop their answer in. All of the above, Emma. That is certainly relevant. Context behind this poll is we're going to look at a lot of kind of the behind the scenes of why these different options might happen and why there might be some kind of resistance. And hopefully at the end of today, we'll have a lot of ideas around how we can tackle these challenges that might come up. So in terms of what we're seeing, first of all, interesting that the top answer coming out is asking, but how do we action this? Second most popular option is taking notes, saying thanks, and carrying on as before. A couple of people answering that around challenging the methodology or sharing anecdotes, and unfortunately no one saying get excited and make changes. So as I've said, I'm really positive that by the end of this session, we'll be able to look at how we can move from that mindset of asking, how do we actually action this, to that process of making actions come true. So thanks everyone for taking part in that, and hopefully sparked a bit of interest in what we're going to move into today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first expert for today, Jenny, to share her story of going from instinct to insight.
Thank you very much, Zoe, and thank you everyone for having me. It's fascinating to see the results of that poll validating the journey I had when I arrived at Grainger. So new to real estate, this is a story of me not just being new in role, but new to industry, and therefore facing a unique challenge in a new role as Director of Customer Experience, entering a business that was actually already incredibly successful. My leadership team has decades of experience. The business has thrived on that experience and their gut feel, and yet their CSAT had become stagnant and there was no answer. With their instincts, the thriving company, of course, my job to come in wasn't to prove them wrong, it was to make them even better. It was to take them from saying, I think, to I know, particularly hard when you're coming from outside of the industry and you're not that voice of experience and you're having to represent the voice of the customer. Now, when I joined the business, it was very much reactive on that gut feel and that experience, very much a loudest approach in the room to customer issues rather than using the data and the validation. An example really there is Grainger PLC is a rental company, so a private rental, so homes. You've got one voice over here saying we want to keep customers, we need to retain them, we want to keep them longer. And then you've got the acquisition and the rental team saying, but the rents are higher over here for new rents, let's get them out, let's get higher rents. No, we want to keep them. And those two conflicting issues and improvement initiatives absolutely disconnecting with the loudest voice in the room. So my job was really to change this and to bring in the power of verbatim. Now, I'm not going to lie, I have made my career on starting with the power of verbatim. Now, we've heard that Net Promoter Score in the industry might be dying a death. We could debate that on a whole nother webinar, I'm sure. But starting with verbatim, right back when Satmetrics owned customer experience methodology, and in fact, the Net Promoter Score when Bain Satmetrics owned it, by starting with the power of verbatim, not the way the playbook tells you to, you're at that right end of the maturity scale, where you can take satisfaction scores back to the voice of the customer. Now, it's really important here that we focus on the partnership here, transforming the verbatim into actionable insight. I had the pleasure of explaining also externally how crucial getting the buy-in for this verbatim is. Now, I don't need to tell you this. If you're a Wordnerds customer, you already know the power of verbatim, but it is now the first foundational step I take, not the surveys and not the quantitative data, but the qualitative. I know from previous experience in my years of just how powerful proper verbatim analysis can be. And I needed to explain to the business why we had to move past basic satisfaction scores to real customer voice. So like many of you, that's why I chose Wordnerds, and the partnership transformed pretty much overnight. I ran a proof of concept. It took days, not weeks, for me to have a rich, detailed understanding of what customers, for me, in a new industry, coming from no years of experience, were really saying, the context around their experiences, the root cause analysis, the really important part, and the proper sentiment understanding. So not just how often someone said something, but how often they said it with proper feeling. So this got me to where many of you already are, having really good insight, but that was my voice alone. So what I needed to do was really think, so how do I get it to be really understood? How do I get the leadership team and our business to buy into this? Now, we did have touchpoint surveys. We had a small voice of the customer program when I joined the business. It measured 5 stages of the customer journey. And no surprise if you hear me talk about loudest voice in the room, it was the 5 stages that people thought were the most important. And the loudest voice said they wanted to measure, and it benefited their own objectives. But the verbatim wasn't properly analysed, and customers didn't just give feedback about those 5 touch points. They also gave feedbacks via social media and annual NPS reviews. And even in those 5 touch points, even if we weren't asking explicitly about that point, they would tell us about other stages of the customer journey, pain points, success points. They'll naturally started to tell us what particular issue happened to them at their stage of the rental journey. So having this rich source and using the customer's own words, we were able to remap a customer journey stage alongside the customer's organically told experience. Now, we did map that onto 9 new stages of the customer journey. So suddenly the insight could be contextualized into a format that was digestible, understood, but critically, those 9 stages organically spoken about. And it's really important to say that I did not start 5 new surveys on top of the 5 we had to get to these 9. This came from the verbatim to get the business to think about customer experience in that linear rental journey. Now, of course, it was familiar because it's the way the business was set up. At Interest, we had a rental team, we had a lettings team out doing viewings, we had an in-house team looking after the paperwork and the progressing of the tenancies. You have on-site teams in my product portfolio looking after your day-to-day living. You might have a repair and maintenance where you'd have some of the facilities management teams. You had a very skilled renewal team asking really the negotiation of will you pay more to stay next year? And of course, then we had the onboarding teams that would also offboard. So not only model, which meant that each of the 9 journey stages mapped to the teams that were accountable. But again, it is just at that point still insight. So I had to think, how are they going to take more than my word for this? I'm new to the industry. What's the best way to present this to my stakeholders? And what I told the business is what's got you here won't get you there. Now you can see I've worked at M&S, and if any of you have worked at M&S or you've read any posts from the CEO Stuart Machin, you'll know that's a quote from him. I didn't think I'd ever quote him in a webinar, but I will accredit him with that. And the workshop of What's Got Us Here Won't Get Us There, also labelled Instinct Insight Workshop, was where I started. Now we knew, and you've heard me say, my stakeholder forward. So I mapped the customer journey with them. Now, what was really important is I got them to go along this journey visually with them. So we ran a really exciting workshop. Now, it was part of a larger strategy day. So they've been sat down all day looking at 5-year plans and finances on the screen. And I asked them to map their instincts. I gave them the 9 journey stages, and I asked them to go along the linear rental journey with me and map where they thought the customer sentiment, using the Wordnerds sentiment score that I'd given them in a pre-read, of what the sentiment of the customers would be at each 9 stages of that journey. Not only that, I asked them, what do you think we should do about it at that stage? So that all-important poll there of no one goes, great, let's do something, or they ask, how do we do something about this? I was asking them, so that naturally we had that curiosity immediately of not just, I think we're brilliant, spoiler alert, by the way, the team thought we were brilliant at all 9 stages, but what we should do about it. It made it really fun, really engaging, and it meant we harnessed all that other anecdotal feedback that we could revalidate via a contextual theme if we wanted to in Wordnerds. But of course, it got them through the process of sharing their instincts and their experience, and they could see where the business had got to so far. After a pause, and I did let them then have a coffee and a cake, we brought them back in the room, and then I shared the revelation of where the insight actually had come from. And that was our Wordnerds verbatim. I showed the real scores. Now, there were moments because there were some that agreed and disagreed, but mostly we had curiosity because where people had been validated, they now had the reason they felt that way. Where they had not been validated, it allowed us to discuss, well, why is it different? Why is it different than I expected? What could we do differently? I didn't expect that because my anecdote was X, but we could also talk in terms of volume. I think it's really important that after that, we've got to talk about the transition though from that's great, but you're still in a room and you're presenting. There could have still been polite nodding and no action. So the insight to instinct became a bit of a catchphrase. I think there's even a trademark on it. Thanks, Zoe, on the previous slide. But we're now having to move this on to be from insight to influence to that action. And for us to take them on that journey, we were bringing stakeholders along a path to move them from instinct to insight, and insight to action or influence or impact. You can choose any of those 3 words. I needed them to emotionally buy in to move from that instinct and use insight for action. And I'm stressing emotionally because sentiment means that our stakeholders understand the real world customer that they're living in. It's the customer journey lens. And it works really well because it's in natural language and it's in the journey framework that your business understands, or my business understood that linear journey. So thanks to that switch to how can we use this to influence, how would you fix this? And I've still got that list of how they would fix it. And we're going to revisit that this year. Our metrics have utterly transformed to being curious about customer experience. It's foundational to the business. Now, I want to tell you that it's not the NPS that's foundational. It is the sentiment score that's foundational. And people now actively ask me, is my instinct right or wrong about this? They see this source as a trusted advisor, not necessarily consultancy, but trusted advisor and collaborator. Now, I want to say here, when I can back up with insights, I'm a purist. I will not prove a hypothesis just to prove a point, but I will give the objective answer. And I will give them the colour and the context of the customer voice. Now, the important thing in your poll was about how do we take action. Now, that's my team set up. So after this exercise and having all those agreed actions, because we could show the 7 actions that were on the customer experience program validated from the insights versus the insights that the senior leadership gave, my team setup is vital. Yes, I have an insights manager, absolutely. But 60% of our time is spent because I have a program delivery, almost like a project manager, setting up the workshops in order to root cause analysis even deeper, re-agree the actions as a result of those customer needs and those actions to actually change and deliver those programs and projects. And so customer experience is seen as transformational because the journey map isn't just a static moment in time. I think what's really important to say here, and I missed in the previous slides, is although I took them through that exercise very manually, don't be afraid if you're going to run this that it needs to be fancy in any way. It was old-fashioned flip chart and pens. But when we represented the insights, I used the business adopted Power BI. And it's a living, breathing journey map. Whether the second a new review comes in or new survey results, that journey map updates. So it's a living, breathing, trackable sentiment analysis across our journey, which means that we can repivot if we need to on the program and the projects to make sure we're still achieving the right outcome. So sounds a bit too much to believe, but every decision really now does start with that customer voice because we can validate it. We've truly become customer centric, not just we're saying it, we really are, not because we've mandated it either, but because we've made customer reality impossible to ignore. If you all thrive on Power BI, as many businesses do, other systems are available, you of course need to know what system is most adopted by your business. I could have put this into a CXM solution. I could have produced a static map. And in fact, we had those predated. I've heard in conferences when I've met many of you, oh, I've got a journey map. I better dust it off and do something with it. Putting it in Power BI and making it living and breathing with the new sentiment was the real game changer to me, because it meant that the people that had contributed in that workshop and believed in the change could actually see, when we were delivering the programs and projects, the expected outcomes. So I'm really proud of what we have achieved. It's been hugely rewarding to do. And the importance of this, I cannot underestimate. What I said at the very beginning is my job wasn't to come in and tell the business they were good or bad. It was to make them better on their gut instincts. And recently in an all hands call, our CEO was asked quite openly, what customer expectations have changed? What do you think has changed over the years? And she started to say, well, I think, and then she stopped. And she paused, probably because she could see me on the screen and my head of data alongside me, and said, actually, no, I know we've got 9 service commitments. And what I know has changed is this, and I know the opinions on repairs and maintenance have changed, and I know the importance of some of the hygiene factors. And she knows because we've done this journey, and it's in a version of a framework that is easy for everyone to understand. It's business adopted, and it reflects the setup of the business. Now, you heard me say, is NPS dying a death? I'm going to circle back and then probably eat my words a little, but I promise you, if you focus the 60% or more on the right actions, if you look at that graph in the bottom left-hand corner, since the investment in customer experience at Grainger, that blue line going up that way is actually our Net Promoter Score. So I will leave you with, if you map it to the framework that is important to you with your stakeholders, that score will take care of itself. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Jenny. I think there's lots of great things to pick up on there. My favourite bit from that, which just summarises everything, is that your CEO is now able to say, I know, not just I think, based on having this data and this evidence. And also that brilliant part around the sort of living, breathing Power BI, which puts this information in a place that's familiar and accessible. And Stella's going to give us a bit of an example of what that can look like later, which everyone also has to look forward to. So I can see loads of positive stuff in the chat, of course, for you, Jenny. If anyone has any questions for Jenny, please do pop those in now, and we'll pick those up at the Q&A at the end as well. So just moving on to the next section, what we wanted to look at now is a bit around the psychology behind why this familiar framework versus isolated insights approach actually works so well. So we heard about Jenny's success. We brought Jenny's success to all of you because it was also interesting. But we were actually really curious about why this approach does work so well. We went away, had a bit of a think about their examples from some other customers doing similar things as well. And then we did some digging into around how people actually process information. And it started to become clear how and why a lot of this approach was working so well. So firstly, what we found was that as our brains are constantly processing so much information, we can actually only consciously deal with a very small proportion of it. So that means that our brains have to filter massively. Even just think of like a single hour in a meeting at work or this hour in this webinar today. There's a lot of information coming at you to digest. There's lots of different stimulus around you. It's kind of no wonder that you're not going to absorb and remember absolutely everything. And how this filter process is working is that our brains filter based on what's familiar and what's relevant to what we're trying to achieve. And that's how things get prioritized. So I think that explains, based on the poll at the start, something that we've all experienced, where you might present brilliant customer insights to stakeholders. You've done all the hard work to get that information. You might go and say, here's what our customers think about pricing. But if that conflicts with what they already think they know, or they don't have the full context of where this insight came from, they might just nod politely, as we saw. They might take some notes, but then at the end of the day, we're going straight back to business as usual. So I think when this happens, it can be very easy to get a bit dejected, to think that your stakeholders maybe just don't care about the problem, what you're solving. But it actually seems like when we're presenting these isolated insights, they're just getting filtered out. If they're not fitting into that existing mental framework, the brain's just not going to hold on to them. So another way that we like to think about this at Wordnerds is that as an insights professional, you're also a translator. So it's your job to present insights in a way that makes sense to the audience. You've got this massive unstructured data, and you've got to turn it into something that makes sense and is meaningful. So summarizing that in other words, what if the issue is you don't need better insight, you just need to present it in a way that is familiar to your stakeholders? So this is why the customer journey mapping is effective as your translator. It's familiar, there's somewhere for the information to slot, and it just makes sense to your stakeholders. When your stakeholders are seeing this information organized in a structure that they already know and that they use, their brains just aren't having to work as hard. A bit like when you're kind of driving a familiar route and you get there before even thinking about the fact that you've driven, you're barely having to think about it. The framework is the thing that provides the scaffolding that is going to make the insights stick. Instead of these kind of random facts floating about that you're throwing out, everything's got a place that it can slot into. And it's important to remember as well that this process, this approach isn't just about using customer journeys, and that's the really exciting bit. So the actual framework that you can use can be whatever makes most sense within your organization. At Wordnerds, we've seen this work with lots of different frameworks. For example, we've got customers who've asked us to map feedback against their company values or their kind of external facing customer promise. Others might use established CX drivers or even operational KPIs as that organizing principle. The magic is kind of never in that specific framework, although we know the customer journey is really powerful, and it's why we've focused quite a lot on that today. But where the magic really lies is in using something that already means something to your stakeholders and it's familiar within your organization. So based on that, the question becomes thinking about what frameworks are already familiar. What lens do your senior team normally use when they are making decisions, thinking about the business? Or what structure would make immediate sense to your operational leads? And this becomes your starting point. The framework is going to provide that context that makes the insights that you deliver actionable. And as a result, we're reducing that cognitive load. We're giving context to create meaning, and we're tapping into those existing mental models so that information becomes easier to process and becomes embedded in people's brains. The next step of this that we loved from Jenny's approach was her prediction method. So we think it's particularly clever. And again, we've been thinking about why this works really well. So here, when Jenny asks stakeholders to predict what customers will say at each journey stage, it's not like she's telling them their instincts are wrong. She's saying, let's look at your experience and see how that compares to what customers are actually saying, whether that aligns and you're validated, or whether it's something different and you can understand why. So with this approach, Jenny creates natural curiosity. If customers predict one saying and stakeholders say another, or vice versa, The stakeholders want to understand why. It's that human nature that we're all curious to understand why we might be right or equally why we might be wrong. So the brilliant bit there is that Jenny is embracing stakeholders' expertise rather than trying to compete with it. She's not asking them to just forget their experience and solely listen to data. She's saying your experience is valuable, but let's see how it matches up with that customer feedback, that direct verbatim. So we've experimented with this approach a bit ourselves, and it's actually really fascinating to see how it changes that dynamic in the room. So it's kind of that group involvement approach. Instead of presenting directly to your stakeholders, you're more exploring with them, and they become partners in that discovery rather than just receiving information. And of course, you can adapt this to work with whatever framework makes sense in your organization. The key is really getting that involvement and comparing assumptions with customer reality. So just to conclude, what we've learned from Jenny's approach and also working with lots of different clients across those different industries is that success isn't just about having better insights, it's also about presenting them in a way that will actually stick. So when you've got those frameworks that are already part of how your organization thinks, the insights stop just being extra information to process amongst millions of other things, and they start being those missing pieces of a puzzle that they're already working on and can help actually bring everything together and create that full picture, give you the solutions you're looking for. So just a few examples to get people thinking around ways that we've seen this work in different ways to just the customer journey. We've worked with a large retailer who has mapped all of their feedback using different customer promise pillars. We work with a lot of social housing associations who use their tenant satisfaction measure criteria, which is a regulatory requirement. They use that as a framework for organising their text feedback, something that's really familiar across their organisation. We work with a brilliant charity who use a super interesting motivations framework so that they can understand what resonates most with their supporters and then apply this across different messaging. And final example, which should be quite applicable to everyone, is that if you conduct employee experience surveys, sort of staff engagement, we work with a lot of teams to use the Hertzberg motivation hygiene framework, which takes principles from a recognized sort of psychological theory and allows you to apply these to understand what motivates your employees. So hopefully some of those examples there just help illustrate that actually the specific framework doesn't matter nearly as much as using one that has meaning in your organization. It might be something that your stakeholders reference in meetings, it could appear in your strategy documents, it might even actually be customer facing. If it's something that people are using to help make decisions, like in a lot of Jenny's example, that's kind of the gold dust where you can really make it clearly align with those actions that we want to drive. So our challenge to you at the end of this is, as a first step for implementing this strategy and kind of embracing that role as a translator, start by considering some of those questions. So what frameworks already hold currency in your organization? What structures do your senior team naturally think in? And also, how do your operational teams organize their work? Once you know the answers to those questions, you can step into that translator role, transform your customer insights from just interesting information into essential intelligence, and it's going to fit perfectly into how you already work. The beauty of this approach is that you'll also know really quickly if it's actually working. So before even looking at the data, you can start to ask questions like, are your stakeholders asking more questions? Are they remembering the insights that you deliver? Are they perhaps bringing them up in future meetings? And importantly, are they actually taking action? And that's when you know how you've really cracked it. So now that we've learned a bit about the background, I want to hand over to Stella, who is going to show us how this works practically in a live demo, moving from our platform and also looking at some Power BI work as well. So I'll hand over to you now, Stella.
Thanks, Zoe. Hard act to follow as always. So I'm Stella. I'm an insights analyst at Wordnerds, and I'm going to show you our step-by-step guide, taking you from mapping your customer journey all the way to visualizing it for stakeholders into a digestible and readable way. So we're going to be using a live demo project that we've built. So we've analysed lots of publicly available data from TripAdvisor and Google reviews to hopefully show you a version that everyone can relate to. So we've chosen hotel guest experience. So as Jenny said, while it can be useful to touch point people across the different stages, you don't actually have to, it doesn't have to be a blocker, as we can use the verbatim and what they're telling us to see where they're at in the journey. And that's what we'll see in this guide. So step 1 is mapping your customer journey. So it doesn't need to be linear or capture the whole journey. Zoe just mentioned a lot of really useful ones there. You may think of it more as the awareness decision-making stages, or it could be the actual experience when they're a customer. We understand you probably have your customer journey nailed and that this looks like a very BTEC version compared to you, sorry. But this is the one that we've chosen for this demo. It's an actionable hotel guest experience, and we're hoping that everyone can understand it. So it's useful to think about what people talk about within the journey and within each stage of the journey. So what that will look like in the verbatim. So if you are manually coding, this is what you'd see when you're reading or just looking, and you'd know that by looking at it. So we want to think, what are people talking about in each stage? So let's take, for example, the room itself. So it can be obvious, like the room was amazing, the room was small. It can also get more niche, as in I didn't sleep very well, the aircon was too loud, the remote didn't work. These are all examples that after you think for a while may pop up of what are people talking about at each stage of the journey. So next, we will capture these journey stages using this customer verbatim. So you've already thought about what people may be saying, and this is where you can look for examples in this journey stage. So you can train the themes and put them onto the platform. So the platform will learn these patterns and it can categorize the reviews by journey stage as you start to train themes. And this is how we're able to categorize the journey without metadata and without touch pointing them across the journey. So I'll take you through an example of training a theme. If I get the platform up. So I'm going to take, for example, front desk staff, which is something we thought you experience at arrival and check-in stage. So I'm just going to quickly show you the start of how we begin to look for verbatim within this. So to start, we'll give an example of what you do want to find. So this is things you've already been thinking of. So I'm going to say, lady at the front desk. I'm scared of typing in front of you guys, but I did it for improv. And then an example of something you don't want, which may be the breakfast was amazing. I did it. I made a few typos, but that's okay. So then I click train, and the platform's going to basically pull up. They're going to use the context of what you've given it and show lots of different examples that they want you to check whether this is right. So I'll go through the front desk isn't what I want. It's just the people at the front desk is what I want at this particular stage of the journey. But as you can see, it spoke to the front desk. Front desks were fine. Front desk, as you can see, it's pulling up things here. Receptionist. So you don't need to think of lots of different ways to talk about the staff at the front desk. This is what the platform does. It'll pull it out within the data to find those examples without you having to find them. So as we train a theme, it'll come more accurate until it understands exactly what you want to look for. And then it'll be able to encapsulate that stage of the customer journey and be quite useful. So step 3 is organizing it into a framework, which you can see we've done here, numbered 1 to 7. This is the framework that we showed on the last slide. So it goes from booking to pre-arrival to post-stay and retention. And within each of these are stages that show what happens at each of these stages. So within booking, you've got all the booking arrival themes. Arrival, you've got the arrival, the first impression, the staff, the room, etc., etc. So the beauty is it's really customizable to what you want your customer journey or journey to be. So next, we'll go on to Power BI, and this is where the magic happens. This is our customer journey page, which we're pretty proud of. And this shows the data that your stakeholders and your platform users can see their insight in a readable and digestible and pretty way. So this visual shows the complete customer journey with sentiment on the y-axis. The volume is the size of the circle, and then it has the customer journey along the x-axis here. So you can explore interactively, you can drill down into verbatim using this, and you can identify what themes overlap to drive experience quality at each stage. So in this, we're comparing years. So the black is 2024 and the red is 2025. And I've taken, for example, the Rosewood in London. You don't have to compare years. You can compare competitors. You could compare your brands. So if you want to see what people are saying on social media versus what are they saying on TripAdvisor, this is all done. It's all customizable, as I said. So here we can see that for the Rosewood, they've managed to improve satisfaction across all stages of their customer journey. We're able to see that they've increased the most in the bar, dining, and room experience, and they've decreased the least, or the lowest sentiment category, which is post-stay and retention. So I'm able to go into here, see what's driving positivity, what's driving the volume in each stage. I'm able to go down into the verbatim if that's what I want. I can go onto the platform, see what's crossing over, what themes and topics coming up. It's all, as I said, very customizable. So Jenny was already ahead of the curve. She realized that it's a good way to visualize it into BI. So this is what we've come up with to hopefully visualize the customer journey in a very nice and easy way. So this is how we've gone from mapping the customer journey to visualizing it for stakeholders and bringing it to life using a familiar customer journey to make it more accessible. You don't need lots of different surveys for people to tell you what stage you're at. This will come out using the verbatim. And hopefully this has inspired everyone that's here to get out and try it for yourself. I think it's quite interesting stuff. So back to you, Zoe.
Amazing. Thanks, Stella. Never easy to do a live demo, and you smashed that. As Stella said, we're super proud of that customer journey view, and I think some people on this call that I recognise might have seen it and hopefully started using that within their organisations as we've been working on presenting these insights in Power BI as well. So yeah, great example, and hopefully that has sparked some inspiration for everyone else as well. So what we'd like to do with the remaining time today is just open it out to a Q&A session. We've got a few in the chat already, but as we go, if anyone would like to add in any more questions, please do, either for myself, for Stella, or for Jenny as well. Starting off, we'll start with Emma's question, which will go to yourself, Jenny, which was related to your part of the presentation about the presenting the customer journey within Power BI. So Emma said, I love the living customer journey. How long did it take you to build that view within Power BI?
I actually had to just go and look. It started, so my new customer experience insight manager started 29th of July. That's when we first engaged with Nat on this piece of work, who's our customer success manager at Wordnerds. And I had my first playback using the 9 themes set up into a framework that you just saw demonstrated on the 22nd of August. Now that was the first playback. There were some iterations and we had it about mid-September exactly the way we wanted it, with the right level of drill down, and that included behind those 9 stages, 19 and then 38 more granular, should we want them, but to articulate to the stakeholders those 9 big stages. And so just under a month for that first iteration, thanks to the correct framework setup and those contextual themes, making sure we hit the health score there in order to make sure that we populated via, I think it was the Redshift database we used with Wordnerds.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I think that's an important step, getting those foundations in place and then having that vision to be able to set it up in BI as well. Another question for you next, Jenny. So Neve has asked, how did you invite your stakeholders to the meeting, the workshop meeting, and how did you pitch that workshop to them?
I was really lucky that it was an annual meeting that I didn't know happened when I first joined Grainger. It's happening again very shortly, so I've just actually shared I had those insights by the 22nd of August, that first cut. We have what's called the Hampshire Group. It's about the top 40 leaders. We meet once a year just to take a look at our strategy. Our trading year is 1st of October to 1st of October, so it's always around that first week of September. And I was able to put this alongside the 5-year plan. So that was really powerful. But what I made sure I did is I didn't call it a customer experience or a customer journey. I just used that impactful title of instinct to insight. And I actually have removed the term experience from our strategy. We just call it the customer strategy with the service commitment, something that is for everyone and not a customer experience team. It's the customer strategy. One of the really important things I did, and particularly for the experts in the room and the people that I already had identified were reflectors or perhaps a little more introverted, was a pre-read to that. So when I pitched the workshop, it wasn't blind. I wasn't taking them on an instinct to insight workshop blind. They had 7 key moments, key drivers. So Wordnerds also helped me in the background of producing that Power BI to look at what the customer experience drivers framework was within those 9 stages. And I presented the detail behind those 7 points. So people who hadn't thought about a customer journey, those senior managers in finance who might not think they touched the journey, were coming with that knowledge. I also really advocate pre-dropping methodology. So prior to that, I had used our all hands call just to introduce myself, my team. You heard me say I had a new insight manager join me on the 29th of July, and we talked about the methodology. In the pre-read was also the methodology, the Wordnerds Insight to Impact model. It's a lovely infinity cycle that meant the methodology wasn't a mystery. So again, on that poll, it just took away that opportunity for conflict around mistrusting the methodology. Questions could be asked up front. So in summary, don't make it a mystery, send a pre-read, call it something really not leading or like your department only owns it, open it up to our customer strategy, and just pitch the workshop as something they're going to bring their expertise to.
Amazing, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I think that's something that I personally can really resonate, that when you understand a bit about what you're walking into and you can have that reflection time almost beforehand, it makes it far easier to contribute when you're in a live environment as well. So I think, yeah, that really helps open it up to everyone in the room, given that context as well, to help their brains get into gear in terms of processing that information. I should mention as well at this point, good chance to plug our handout, which will be available. So we've created a bit of a toolkit guide with essentially how you can put into place everything that we've talked about today. Part of that we mentioned is including that pre-read information in terms of if you wanted to run one of these workshops yourself. So that's available to download here, and we'll be emailing it out to everyone tomorrow as well, which will hopefully help with getting those steps in place. Great. So Maddie next has asked, interesting to look at the psychology behind this. Is there anything you can recommend in terms of further reading? Yeah, there's so much available on this, just in terms of the power of context when you're actually processing information and sharing information. We've again included some bits in the pre-read around the research and things. So sorry, in the handout around the research. So we'll get that across to you, and we can also share some other personalized recommendations in terms of if you want to dive into this even more. So really, really great to hear that that sparked some interest as well. Cool. Just looking through the chat. Tim said, thanks, Stella. You just gave me a light bulb moment. That sounds very exciting, Tim. Oh, okay. At the moment, we are using the customer journey framework over one particular service delivery, but we can scale this to view the total customer experience across the whole tenancy whilst a property is occupied and whilst a property is void. Could use it to look at staff's journey to make the property lettable again. So this might reveal issues internally also. Absolutely love that, Tim. Congrats, Stella. Sorry, Jenny, did you want to add something there?
No, I just said there's our light bulb.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, super excited to see that come to life, Tim. And I think hopefully that's sparked other ideas similar with our other guests as well. Cool. Another question for Jenny from Caroline. So how do you ensure that high volume customer insight touchpoints and surveys don't bias your results?
I know Wordnerds have asked me to speak, but truly that's the beauty of Wordnerds, and that's the beauty of a sentiment score over a word count, because you're not just looking at the volume of customer at that touch point, you're looking at, yes, the most thing, but with the most negative or positive sentiment, almost a weighted scale then. And that's how, by using sentiment, I could remove that volume bias. Equally, I can remove it in the other way, that low volume, but really said negatively, those anecdotes that we asked about in the poll, oh yes, but I know because that one customer emailed me once, or that one customer said to me, it helps cut through that noise in the opposite way as well. So by focusing on the sentiment, on the things that really nudge the needle the most, and taking that action to repeat back, it's about the action as much as the insight. The rest will take care of itself. Don't fall into that bias trap. And that's why you leverage the power of sentiment over a CSAT or an NPS or a volume metric.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what you've just said, Jenny, might quite apply to Cheyenne's next question. So Cheyenne has asked, often in our organisation, stakeholders are able to predict verbatim and sentiment levels regarding our complaints and repairs service, as in particular, we've had the same issues occurring for a while.
Yeah.
When stakeholders are already aware of what the verbatim is saying, how do you motivate them to take action based on the feedback rather than their own experience?
Well, that's why I had to take the team setup I did. I needed a program delivery manager and a project manager that keeps the stakeholders or the working group true to the customer needs statement. So the other framework I use to help and keep the motivation on the action based rather than their own experience is, if any of you have set up technical systems, you might have used user stories and success criteria. We'll use the Wordnerds verbatim, the customer words, to write that success criteria. So as a customer, I XXX. And the program manager's role, the customer experience program manager's role over my insight manager, is to keep that working group, that project, that stakeholder true to that success criteria. Yes, their own experience is absolutely valid, and that can pivot the root cause sometimes, because it might be that extra anecdote that unlocks that light bulb that Tim's just had, for example, as to how we can get to that moment. And we have the same challenges, Tim, of that void turnover, and that what do we know of the staff experience as well. So absolutely leverage a customer success criteria would be my highest advice for keeping those stakeholders motivated to take action on the feedback. You need that buy-in, that needs a scene setting, and that's what my project manager does. She sits down with a RACI, who is responsible for delivering this, but who is ultimately accountable for that success criteria outcome. But you need a very strong person in that role, would be my advice, if it's not already you.
Amazing, thanks, Jenny. I think from my point of view as well, this relates back to what you were saying earlier about the Power BI being that living, breathing document that people can refer back to, because quite often, even if you've got those same issues occurring, you know, over time, it's seeing how that has changed. Maybe it's like the sentiment around a particular issue, by being able to look at that based on a journey stage, using that Power BI that everyone has access to, is familiar within your organization, I think can also be quite powerful there as well. So yeah, really great to hear that. Thank you. I think that might be all of our questions that we've got so far. Just while I'm wrapping up, if anyone else wants to pop any questions in, please do. Stella, you've got a flightly so far. So we'll, in the meantime, what you'll get after today, you can see in the handout section, there'll shortly be available the toolkit, which I've referenced, for you to download on the webinar today. That takes you through how you can actually implement this process live starting tomorrow within your organization, going from that kind of pre-read to workshop to what next as well. So that will be available to download. We'll be emailing that out to everyone tomorrow as well. And this afternoon, you'll also get a recording of today's webinar. So please do feel free to share that with anyone that you feel this might resonate with as well. And that will be live in your inboxes this afternoon. But if we don't have anything else, so that handout is now available. You can click to download it just on the right-hand side in the handouts tab as well. But yeah, so just to say thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. Thank you for all the questions and engagement. Hopefully we've had a few more light bulb moments as well experienced as Tim did. So we'd love to hear about that as you work through your journey at Wordnerds too. Your CSMs, customer success managers, are here to help you if you're an existing Wordnerds customer and want to talk more about how to put any of this into practice, or reach out to an account manager as well if there's any other questions that you would like to have. So yeah, just thanks again. Thank you so much, Jenny. So interesting, and we've heard the story a few times now, but it never gets boring. And thank you, Stella, for taking us through that live process as well. So yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.